Hello and welcome to ET Energy World's panel discussion on hydro. India's hydropower story has been far from impressive. The sector's share in the total power generation capacity in the country has come down from around 40 to 50%, let's say in 1966, to less than 15% now. And that is not something to be proud of. Today, we are discussing the main issues and concerns which are facing the sector with an extremely distinguished set of panelists. The panelists include Mr. Anil Razdan, former Power Secretary, Mr. M. Madan, who is heading the hydro business of JSPL, Mr. Tushar Sood, who is an independent expert from Deloitte, who deals with energy and resources sector, and lastly, Mr. K. Singh, who heads the hydro business of NTPC. So it's better to look at the numbers first. Sir, if you look at India's hydropower story, it has not been a very impressive story to say. We have around 3 lakh megawatt of total capacity, out of which around 15 to 20% is only hydro at the moment. And that share has kind of come down over the years. So beginning with around, I think around 40 to 50% total capacity share from hydro many years ago in 1960s. Today we have 15% share, and that's not something to be proud of. So I will first have to ask Mr. Razdan what is his sense of the entire sector, how has it grown over the years, and looking at the current policies, where do you think broadly do you think the sector is headed?
See, first talking of numbers, I think, as you rightly said, the share of hydro has gradually come down from almost 50% to about 14% of the installed capacity. And if you talk in terms of the actual generation units that are fed into the grid, I think the number is below even 10%. But what is more alarming is that over the recent years, I think over the last one or two plans, the share of hydro in the overall capacity addition scenario is threatening to be only about 5% in the 5-year period. And I think even in the current plan, we are going to fall pretty short of our modest target for hydro. And hydro, of course, besides being a clean source of energy, it also has, you see, a tremendous benefit of water utilization. And I think we have to look back at multi-purpose projects also in a country like India, which is water scarce. Uh, Dams like Bhakra, Tehri, all these are schemes which have brought prosperity to an entire region.
You're talking about the use of hydro in
Yes,
irrigation and
precisely, conjunctive use for irrigation and drinking water, which is more important because it is water management, I think. Now, that is where, in fact, some of the problems of hydro start. And because water and water power are state subjects in our listing of subjects, and they're not even concurrent like power. So, essentially, uh, if hydro has to move forward, the states have to come on board and take upon it themselves that hydropower has to be pushed forward. Now, how wise it was, maybe when the constitution was being framed, the importance of hydropower in the nation was not understood. But today, water and I think water power are national issues. And maybe there has to be a debate that why not bring them in the concurrent list. At least that would be the starting point. Because I think till that happens, we have other issues then waiting for us, like environment and forest clearances, the huge risks involved in hydro construction, execution risks, because we are working in the Himalayas, which are young mountains, and there are other issues connected with financing and the limits to which we can impose tariffs. But given India's capacity addition profile over the years, whether it is thermal, which is baseload power essentially, or it is now the new renewables like solar and wind, which are intermittent, hydro for grid management is an absolute necessity.
okay. I would like Tushar to come in there and tell us, Mr. Razdan has covered almost broadly every single topic and every single issue that the sector is currently facing. But talking from a policy point of view, Tushar, can you tell us what have been the key focus areas, 3 or 4 main focus areas of the government when it comes to policy. For example, we're talking about a government that allowed open access to happen, that allowed differential power tariffs also for peak and non-peak. So some things that the government has done. What's your analysis of the on the policy front? Did the government take enough steps to kind of improve the growth of the sector, or did we lack somewhere? What is wrong?
So if we see at the time of independence, hydro was, we had around 40 to 50% hydro. Over a period, as you said, it has come down to 15% or 14% now, and it's going to decline. So the critical issue has been why it has happened, because we have seen growth. So one of the reasons could be, and that's where the policy focus may have been lost, is that somehow it got pegged to thermal. Now, when we were always catching up on the demand in terms of supply to be fulfilled, hydro story got lost because it had its own challenges in terms of a longer gestation period. There was no preferential treatment, so to say, in some of the terms that, a choice between thermal and hydro. And so over a period, we saw more focus coming into thermal to have that catching up on the demand. And unfortunately, that story continued. So if we look today, renewable at the end of 9th plan would have been around 1/10 of what hydro is. Today, renewable has caught up with hydro and is exceeding hydro in the overall installed capacity. So maybe there is a policy lacuna in some way that, while renewable has had that story, why hydro again lagged behind. And some of it, as Mr. Rajdan already pointed out, is also to do with it being on the state subject, location specific issues, which ail hydro in a lot of ways. And that has led to issues which could not be resolved upfront. And over a period, those have been put on a back burner, because if the focus was to get the generation on ground, since we were always.
We have, an expert telling here that over the next, let's say, 5 years or so, the share is going to go down even further. Now, that's the likely scenario. Now, what does that really mean for consumers? What does that really mean for the nation? Would that, what is the possibility that it would have it would take a toll on our energy security, imperatives?
Right. So absolutely, if we look at the current plan performance, I think hydro had some 10 gigawatts of target, and we have not hardly met 1/3, and we are already 3,000, 1/3, I'll say. And so it's not likely that we are going to have the same situation. And since we have always lagged, there has been a lag between performance and the target for last 2 5-year plans. Also, it's likely to be the same story. So what it also does is that it breaks the inertia. So, and going forward, the focus shifts to more doable things. So unless that comes back, it's going to be the same story which will repeat. The other thing is the assumption we have to look at also is where hydro can play a role going forward. Now with more renewable integration, hydro has its own advantages, and that needs to be focused on and looked at. So that it actually aligns well with the renewable story, and going forward we have more focus on hydro.
We have Mr. Madan here who can tell us more about what are the key challenges that any private sector company operating in this area actually faces. I'm saying this because there is a view that private sector's participation has not been as good as it was expected to be. So there is something specific that is happening on ground that that the policy makers sitting in Delhi and in the center are kind of missing. So is there something that you can tell us on that front, sir?
Yeah. If we talk of Jindal Power Limited, then in Arunachal we have got 3 large projects. One is Italin, which is 3097 megawatt. Then we have Kamla, 1800 megawatt. Then we have Atolni, which is 680 megawatt, totaling around 5600 megawatt in all. Italin is now cleared from all the areas, except, you see, we did public hearing in one shot for such a large project in December 2014. Now it is 16. Till today we have not got environment and forest clearance, because the basin studies were not done by Government of India. It should have been done by them. Now the fault lies on whom? It's not our fault that we have not done the basin study. Basin study was to be done before the project was cleared. So all the parameters are cleared, TEC is cleared, from every angle the project is ready for execution except basin study, which will be done now after 1.5 years of delay, more than that. Now after getting this, the basic issues which are coming with the private sector are the PPA, power project purchase agreement. Power purchase agreement, DISCOMs are not ready to sign with anybody, with any private party. Why? Because they want electricity below 4 rupees, hydropower below 4 rupees after 8 years. When we are talking to them that this will supply after 8 years, they say, can you give us below 4 rupees? Now who can give below 4 rupees? DISCOMs are not ready. For CPSUs, they are signing agreement on pro rata basis or on a basis where they are beneficiaries of the states. NHPC, NTPC, they are producing some power. There's a quota is fixed for Assam, quota is fixed for Rajasthan, quota is fixed for some states. For hydropower, for the private sector, nothing is fixed. Now we have to go ask for every DISCOM to sign a PPA. They say we cannot sign if you give us a cheaper power. Whereas there is demand. Now where the demand is gone now. Demand is there. We hear that power is surplus. From where it is surplus? We don't understand this. This is simple logic. There is a demand, power population is growing. If you go to China, you see they have got 15 lakh megawatt installed capacity, out of which 3 lakh megawatt is hydro only. Here in India, we got 3 lakh megawatt total installed capacity, out of which 42,000 is hydro only. So demand is there, but nobody is signing PPA. Once you don't sign PPA, you don't get funding. So we are stuck. All private parties are stuck like that there is no funding available because PPA is not getting signed. We went to government, we said, okay, you make hydro lucrative because this is the most essential thing. Hydro, you cannot do without hydro. Alone solar and wind will not help you. Thermal is a base load. If you go for peaking, then you need hydro. For that, you give us some benefits, like give us cheaper rate of loans, extend the loan period. There was some mega power policy was there, which was withdrawn. Why it has been withdrawn, we don't know. It should be reintroduced so that hydro sector gets a boost. State government keeps on imposing taxes. The taxes are mounting. Almost 20 to 25% are taxes. They should be reduced. So make it more attractive. So private parties are ready to do. Technical know-how is always there in India. There is no dearth of technical know-how. So we can construct the projects. We can do everything, provided somebody is there to buy our power. So that is the basic issue.
Yeah. Mr. Razam, at least two very major issues Mr. Madan has highlighted here. First is, of course, the expectation of cheap power. People are saying 40%. Now, of course, everybody knows that hydro, when it comes to generation, is among the cheapest. The cost of generation is very low. But is that expectation of a long-term availability of power at a very cheap rate as low as that, is that justifiable? Is that sustainable? And second issue is, of course, basic work not done by a CEA, I think, when they are preparing their basic project reports. I will take the second issue first. We know that that CEA had prepared DPR for a really large number of projects earlier. What is the status of that, and where has it gone? If that level of groundwork was done, so why are companies now facing? I'm talking about shelf of projects that CEA had created in hydro earlier. So, but still, if companies are facing that issue, so something somewhere has gone wrong. What's your assessment?
See, this point is well taken, that I personally have been of the view that hydro projects should be looked at from a basin as the basic unit for planning and creation of infrastructure as well as evacuation of power. What has been happening is that the states have also willy-nilly, they've been using hydro projects, sorry for using the term, as a milking cow. And you allot one project to one person at the nearest point, maybe who offers the most attractive tariff. The most difficult part is pushed to the furthest end, whatever Mr. Madan may say. But I think I've seen that where some public sector projects were taken away by the states after allocating them to NHPC, and the peachier ones were allotted to the private sector. Of course, things can happen, but nothing has moved. But I come back to the point that you have to have a basin-wise approach, and you have to first see that there's connectivity. On a map of India, it looks very impressive that we've got so much potential in Arunachal Pradesh. But where are the roads? Where is the accessibility? Now, till you develop those roads and that accessibility, logistics will not happen, and you will not be able to build projects of this magnitude, 2000, 4000 megawatts. They're huge projects which require certain dimension of equipment and transport to move.
Even transmission constraints.
Yes, transmission constraints. So the whole thing has to be planned as a basin. I think when we were around the 10th plan, moving towards the 11th plan, we sudden spurt in the demand that we were visualizing. There was this great enthusiasm, and a lot of private sector said that, well, hydro looks something good, and let's jump into that. Yes, there should have been a lot of hand holding at that stage and understanding, and I think environmentally also we've got to see that yes, clearances must be evaluated and given or not given at the earliest. We can't let these projects hang on for years together. Mr. Badad raised a very relevant point of cost of power. I think the cost of power in hydro projects varies from about 24 paise a unit to almost 10 rupees or 15 rupees a unit even, in some cases. Now, India is a country which is not very affluent, and power sale and its demand is extremely price sensitive. We already have missed a lot of buses in the past. I mean, projects like Bhakra, Koina, Shravati, they were all built in good time, and these are all sub 30 paise tariffs. They paid off more than 50 years running. They've celebrated their golden jubilees. Now the projects, if you keep a project hanging for about 10 years, 15 years, which should have been done in 6 years from the time of financial closure, the costs are going to go on mounting. And I think personally that unless you impose peaking power tariffs mandatorily, I would say frequency based tariffs, there is no way that you will be able to sell 6 to 8 rupees power in the market very easily. This in turn, you will, if you can't do the PPAs, as Mr. Madan has said, you will not be able to find bankers to give you the money for it. So it becomes a vicious circle. So I think the government, when it is looking at new policies, has to look at 2 or 3 issues. First of all, hydro projects must give benefits to the local population.
Benefit sharing mechanism.
Yes, a benefit sharing mechanism. I tried very hard as Power Secretary in a relook at the hydro policy that make the local residents stakeholders, substantial stakeholders in the benefits of the project.
Like it happens in the cases of mining, for example.
Yes, give them, I would say, 5 to 10% of the tariff in perpetuity for their own area development, so that they get a stake in the commissioning of the project. What is happening today is that we do not give them a stake in the commissioning of the project, we only give them a stake in the R&R, the relief and rehabilitation. So at times the focus is on not getting all benefits before a project is commissioned, and you stall the commissioning of the project as long as you can till you can extract the best possible benefits out of it. And once it is commissioned, you don't get the benefits. Of course, some marginal improvement has taken place, because in the last hydro policy we said that so much free power must be given to every household. But that is not enough. I think they've got to be made substantial stakeholders so that they see that the real benefits will start flowing once the project is commissioned, and they get a very handsome share out of the profits or the tariff from these projects. And this is where the states, you see, instead of using those hydro projects only on the free share basis and the costs escalating and the bidders outbidding each other, ultimately making the whole industry sick, this is certainly not a viable practice and will be entirely against the interests of the country. The point that has been made of hydro as a balancing power, yes, it must happen. And I think earlier for thermal also, the pace at which we were moving, we should have made a hydro purchase obligation as part of your dispensing thermal power for grid balancing. Today, the way we are going in solar and wind, we must make again this balancing power a purchase obligation for whoever buys that power. Luckily, the tariffs of new renewables have come down to affordable levels, and I think this balancing component must be imposed on that source of power, otherwise the whole system will collapse. And if the grid collapses, there's only hydropower that can revive it, not thermal. In a black start, technical experts will tell me it is only hydropower which can revive your grid. The dead man can only get this electric impulse from there. He can't wait for thermal or other sources.
So two very important suggestions you made. One is purchase obligation, like of the kind we have in the renewable sector, and of course having some basic quantum of hydro available always for in the case of a blackdown, for example. On that point, I would come to Mr. Singh. You have just recently commissioned Coal Dam. Now, I want to know what has been your experience on the ground, for example. I'm sure the company would have faced a lot of issues of land acquisition, R&R, and everything. So, firstly, what is the kind of protest that was seen in your case there? And there was an expectation earlier that after the land acquisition Act comes into being in 2014, a lot of those issues will not, they will cease to exist. So, is that something that you saw there?
As Rajdan Sahab has told that local population should be made a stakeholder to get the project executed smoothly. NTPC first maiden project was Coal Dam. There we have faced problem about the land acquisition also, and time to time implement issues. But in the agreement itself, it has been taken, this aspect has been taken, that whatever unskilled manpower or skilled manpower is required, that will be mostly they will be taken from the local area if they are found suitable. And according to for local area benefit, already there is provision of local area development fund and some 100 units for the local population, ousted families, whoever has given their land, 100 units for 10 years we are giving it. So almost it is coming around 0.6%, and 1% is lead development, local area development fund, and 13% is the free power. So these things already we are approaching giving, but at the same time local population is having expectation of the permanent employment, and that which cannot be fulfilled in totality. Some people can, and there is indirect employment, but still they are having expectation of permanent. That these points we are facing, but at the same time we are managing it. We have already engaged so many persons as social benefits, and we are taking this local population as far as possible. They are taking into our board, so that work goes smoothly. And in the Uttarakhand also we are facing the same type of problem. But as Secretary Sahib had told, that we have made them part and parcel of the development. Still as far as possible we can accommodate maximum persons. Those things we are doing. NTPC is doing very well that way. But we have faced some problem in between when the project is getting installed. This creates problem for overall development of this hydro. This particularly closure of this Luhari Nagpala project. Again this Supreme Court, this Lata Tabon project, and another this even in the Arunachal, this Suhansri projects installing. These things have created very negative impact over the hydro People are not certain whether these projects taken up will be completed or not completed, or in between it will be stalled. So such fear amongst the developers should be removed. Once project clearance is given, that should not be stopped. Before giving clearance, every study should be done, and once it is given, it should continue.
Tushar, talking about local protests, there is a view that such local protests are generally more pronounced in cases of storage type of projects, right, rather than run of the river. Now, can you tell us, as a layperson, I want to know what is the difference between these two types of schemes of hydro, and is that a view you would subscribe to, that there is less likely to be a situation of a protest in cases of storage run of the river types projects?
So in the present context, that may not be true. See, any rehabilitation which happens leads to a lot of issues in the local population. So the quantum gets aggravated when it comes to storage based, and also the period is longer. So if you see Tehri and all, because they were implemented over longer period, and also because of course the submerged area is more. So in that sense, yes, storage the highlights those issues, but it is not to say that run of the river does not have that. Just to sort of take on that example on benefit sharing and compensation, we have been compensating so far. It's more of taking away some form of livelihood to compensate that. Benefit sharing is more in terms of stakeholder participation in the project. Nepal has tried it out. They have made it mandatory for the new projects to have a local shares for the local population. So the two projects which are being which recently got awarded or a couple of years back, both have a 10% local share provision. Now that changes the game. Of course, it still has issues in terms of it has. It's also how you convey the message. Sometimes that's missing. So sometimes those are the key issues. So run of the river, I'll say, because the it's lesser in magnitude, so it tends to add up. But it is not to say that run of the river does not have those issues. They have similar issues. And
Mr. Rajdan, I remember very clearly when you were the secretary, this debate between ROR versus storage was at its peak, and every other day we used to have that debate. What's your sense of the path that India has chosen when it comes to commissioning of hydro projects? When it comes to choosing, what kind of schemes do you want to choose for your projects? What has been India's experience, and what is a better way of doing it?
See, I think the maximum benefits that you can draw out of a project, as I said, essentially water management, should be your guiding principle in my view. I wouldn't entirely go for run-of-river projects because some of them present tremendous execution problems.
Silting is also, I think, a problem.
No, not really silting. It is, you see, your geological task becomes much bigger. You have a huge overburden. You do not know what the insides of a mountain are, whether there are fossil valleys inside, whether you're encountering water. In the northeast, there was even gas. In some projects, you see, while building tunnels. So you can have all kinds of issues. Of course, forecasting techniques become extremely important in run-of-the-river projects. But besides that, I think you see there's so much blasting also in run-of-the-river projects that can also create and has caused some protests in some areas. The other problem, I think, run-of-the-river projects, which we have to be extremely vigilant about, is you see all the that excavated material which comes out of tunnels, that is not always properly disposed of. You raise the point of silting. Now that is really accumulation or wrong disposal of tunneling material, excavated material, which has not been put at the exact dumping sites that ought to be there. Now this can create problems, it can block the river passage, etc. But yes, these protests are at times, of course, coming out of pain, but at times they are also tend to be a little irrational. I mean, I've seen the river Bhagirathi, how badly it is polluted by even towns by Joshimath and others, dropping raw sewage into a holy river. and yet you are protesting against some other activity going on the river, because it is very difficult to unite against a town's population and hold them to ransom, that why are you doing this to a holy river? The worst sacrilege you can do. But I don't see any vigilantes coming out against these things. And yet you would find against a developer, there will be all flags and demonstrations and placards. Both situations are not desirable, they need to be controlled, as I said. But at the same time, you see the recent Uttarakhand debate, where all the projects have been frozen. I think one basic flaw we have done in this country in the development process, we have not respected the flood plains of rivers, the high flood points of drainage systems. You have umpteen proposals coming for industrial estates, for townships. Whoever can buy land, any piece of land anywhere, thinks it's fit for development, for putting up multi-storied apartments. And where will the water go? Gurgaon was a recent example. Now, there was no hydroelectric project there, but this city almost sank with a little bit of rain, because you've blocked all the drainage. The water flow nature has provided has to find its way out. Now, if in Uttarakhand and other hill states you come and build massive buildings right on the bank of the river without respecting its floodplain, you are asking for trouble. And if you build such heavy structures and drill through for their bases and things, you are probably disturbing the whole ecology of the place. So a river, first of all, as I said, its flow and its floodplain has to be respected. Now this brings us to the questions you see of some of the projects again on the Bhagirathi, where we want an unobstructed flow through the year. Okay, an environmental flow, as it was said in some earlier cases. These are important issues, they must be done. But then cascade development is another way of looking at these projects, that you develop it in subsequent cascades, and where you channelize the main course of the river into a smaller portion where people have sufficient depth. Even with that environmental flow, they can come do whatever they have to for religious sentiments, or there can be a channelized flow. But while channelizing this flow, you must not build any structures on the floodplain of the river. Otherwise, you are creating problems. The water will force its way out from whichever side it will find that it can do so, and that needs essentially it's human greed and ill planning which has led to these disasters, and I think has put the whole process behind many years.
Well, we have had a very nice discussion on that. On that note, I would say the key message that emerges from this discussion, I would sum it up as 3B and 1C. The 2Bs, for example, are your basin-wise study that you have to do, that holistic basin-wise study of all the potential that you have, that you must do, and you must look at the benefit sharing mechanism in a better way, taking into account the local population, and cascading of projects when you're planning them. On this note, I would end this discussion here. Thank you.